Ladies and gentlemen, let me talk to you about something real. Something that hides in plain sight. Something that smiles in the mirror, shakes your hand, and still walks away with your peace. I'm talking about the narcissists. Not just the loud, flashy kind, but the quiet ones, too. The ones who wear charm like a mask and pride like a crown. Now, you may wonder what breaks a narcissist, what really shakes the ground beneath their feet. Let me tell you something. There are 4 things they never get over. Not because they're weak, but because their ego is a glass house, and truth is a stone that never misses. A narcissist is driven not by love, empathy, or understanding, but by power. Power over how they're seen. Power over what you feel. Power over the choices you make, even when you don't realize it. Control isn't just something they enjoy. It's the fuel that runs their entire personality. The moment they feel that power slipping away even slightly, the foundation beneath their self-image begins to crack. Because at the core of a narcissist identity is the belief that they are superior, exceptional, and entitled to lead or dominate those around them. And that belief is only sustained if they maintain control over the narrative, over you, and over the environment they operate in. For a narcissist, control manifests in different forms. In relationships, it might look like emotional manipulation, guilt-tripping, gaslighting, isolating you from friends or family, or constantly shifting the goalposts so that you never feel secure. In professional settings, it might look like micromanagement, backhanded praise, strategic sabotage of others, or taking credit for accomplishments they didn't earn. In social settings, it can appear as carefully calculated charm used to win admiration and influence people's perceptions. All of this is calculated. All of it is intentional because to lose control is to be vulnerable. Invulnerability to a narcissist is the same as weakness. It's intolerable. When a narcissist begins to feel their grip loosening, whether in a personal relationship, at work, or in any area where they've established dominance, their response is immediate and intense. They might become angry, vindictive, or even panicked. This is not because they care in the way healthy individuals do. It's because their identity is threatened. They have no internal sense of security or grounded self-worth. Everything about them is externalized. What they have, how people see them, how much influence they can exert. Without that control, they don't know who they are. The loss of control often triggers what psychologists call a narcissistic injury, a deep psychological wound to their ego. This injury creates a spiral of rage, defensiveness, and self-protective behavior that can look erratic or explosive to outsiders. If they sense they're losing power in a relationship, they may double down on manipulation, escalating efforts to confuse or destabilize the other person. They might use triangulation, pitting people against each other to regain dominance. They may suddenly switch between excessive praise and cruel devaluation to create chaos and pull emotional strings. Their goal isn't resolution. It's reinstating control. If they're losing control in a public or professional space, they might lash out, shift blame, or start spreading rumors. They often can't admit fault or take accountability because doing so would mean acknowledging they're not perfect, and that's unbearable for them. Instead, they'll try to destroy the credibility of anyone who threatens their power. This isn't just damage control, it's survival. What makes the loss of control particularly devastating for narcissists is that it exposes the truth they're trying so desperately to avoid. They're not in charge of everything and they're not invincible. Their entire worldview is built on illusions. Illusions of importance, perfection, superiority. When someone walks away from them, when a team refuses to follow them, when a partner stops reacting to their emotional tactics, when the people around them start seeing through their act, that illusion begins to break. And narcissists don't have the emotional tools to cope with that kind of collapse. You might notice a narcissist trying to reassert control through hoovering. They may suddenly become charming again, offering apologies or pretending to be vulnerable, but it's not about change. It's about strategy. They're testing to see if they still have access to your emotions, your time, your loyalty. If you respond, they know they can still influence you. If you don't, that silence cuts deep. Not because they love you, but because you've taken away their weapon, your emotional response. The scariest part for a narcissist is realizing they can no longer shape your reality. That their words no longer manipulate you. That their approval or rejection no longer affects your self-worth. That's when the panic sets in. That's when they begin unraveling. Their sense of superiority only works if you believe in it too. Once you stop participating in the game ends. And without the game, they have nothing left. Even small losses of control can send a narcissist spiraling, a friend not texting back quickly, a partner setting a boundary, a child asserting independence, a colleague refusing to be intimidated. These moments might seem minor to most people, but to a narcissist, they're significant threats. Because each one chips away at their illusion of being in charge, and they never forget the people or situations that made them feel powerless. They carry those moments like quiet resentments, always searching for a way to reassert control, even if it takes years. Ultimately, the loss of control doesn't just damage a narcissist's ego. It shatters the entire framework of their self-worth. It shows them that they are not the center of every universe and that other people have power, agency, and the right to choose. And that's the one truth they can never truly accept. Narcissists live for the image. Everything they do, say, and present to the world is calculated to protect, elevate, or exaggerate that image. They build a false self that appears confident, charming, successful, admirable, and even generous on the surface. But that self is hollow. It's not built on truth, but on perception. Their entire sense of worth depends on how others see them. They need to be admired, envied, respected, and seen as above others. That's why public humiliation or exposure hits them harder than almost anything else. It doesn't just embarrass them. It strips away the mask they've worked so hard to keep in place. And what's underneath that mask isn't strength or self-awareness. It's fear, insecurity, and shame. They don't want anyone to see. When a narcissist is exposed, whether for lying, cheating, manipulating, abusing, failing, or pretending to be something they're not, it delivers a direct blow to the core of their false identity. Because they don't just fear failure or wrongdoing, they fear being caught. Their entire life revolves around the avoidance of accountability. They are often skilled at deception, always ready with an excuse or deflection, always positioning themselves as either the victim or the hero. They manipulate stories to protect their image and they surround themselves with people who support or enable their version of reality. So when that version collapses in public, when the truth can no longer be hidden, it's not just a personal embarrassment, it's a psychological collapse. The narcissist's relationship with shame is very different from that of a healthy individual. Most people can feel ashamed, reflect on it, apologize, and use it to grow. But narcissists can't process shame in a healthy way. To them, shame is not just painful. It's unbearable. It feels like annihilation. So, they work their whole lives to avoid it. That's why exposure feels like a kind of death. It leaves them emotionally naked. No longer able to control how they're seen. No longer able to hide their flaws behind charisma, success, or lies. It confirms the thing they fear most, that they are not who they pretend to be, and worse, that others now know it. This exposure doesn't even need to be dramatic. It can be as simple as someone calling out a lie in front of others or evidence surfacing that contradicts their story or an extortioner sharing the reality of what it was like to be with them. It could be a coworker refusing to let them take credit or a friend revealing a pattern of manipulation. Even a comment on social media that draws attention to their inconsistencies can shake them. Because what truly breaks them isn't just the event itself. It's the loss of control over their narrative. And once that narrative begins to unravel in the public eye, they find it nearly impossible to rebuild it the same way again. What makes public exposure uniquely damaging is that it triggers a reaction from others. Suddenly, the people the narcissist once impressed or manipulated begin to see them differently. The admiration turns into skepticism. The compliments fade into silence. The loyalty weakens or disappears. Narcissists depend on the reflection they see in others to maintain their self. Without that external validation, they begin to lose their grip on who they are. They feel attacked not just by one person, but by the loss of their perceived superiority in the eyes of many. They may react with rage, denial, smear campaigns, or retreat. But behind it all is deep emotional injury. In many cases, narcissists will try to regain control after a public exposure. They may deny everything, accuse the person exposing them of being jealous, bitter, or unstable. They may work harder than ever to craft a new narrative to discredit what was revealed. They often gaslight entire groups of people using charm or manipulation to make the exposure seem like a misunderstanding or even a deliberate attack on their character. But these tactics only work if people are still willing to believe them. Once that belief is gone, their options shrink quickly. When the audience stops clapping, the performer has no stage. Being exposed publicly also hits on another deep fear of narcissists, the fear of being ordinary. They go to great lengths to appear exceptional, to separate themselves from the rest of the world through status, talent, intelligence, or beauty. When they are publicly exposed, all of that vanishes. The spotlight that once flattered them now reveals the cracks in their story. They are no longer admired. They're questioned. No longer envied, they're pied or condemned. To a narcissist, that fall from grace is worse than failure. It's emotional exile. Even if the public humiliation happens on a small scale among friends, at work, or within a family, it can still be deeply traumatic for a narcissist. They will replay the moment over and over. They may plot revenge, obsess over what was said, or spiral into depression. They will often become paranoid, constantly monitoring how others are viewing them, trying to gauge whether the damage has been contained or if the ripple effect is still spreading. They may isolate or overcompensate, but the truth is once people have seen behind the mask, the illusion is hard to restore. Narcissists can go their whole lives avoiding meaningful self-reflection, but public exposure forces them to confront a version of themselves they don't want to admit exists. It's not just a moment of humiliation that breaks them. It's the ongoing awareness that the lie they lived in is no longer working. And since their self-worth is built on that lie, they are left with nothing to fall back on. They can't rebuild easily because they were never building on truth in the first place. A narcissist operates from a deeply ingrained belief in their superiority. They see themselves as more intelligent, more desirable, more capable, more valuable than others. It's not just a casual confidence. It's an identity built on the need to feel above everyone else. They rank people in their minds, assigning worth to others based on how useful, admiring, or submissive they are. In every relationship, personal or professional, they unconsciously place themselves at the top of a hierarchy. Everyone else exists in service to their ego. So when someone they consider beneath them, someone they've manipulated, dismissed, underestimated, or emotionally controlled, rejects them, the narcissist is thrown into a storm of confusion, rage, and deep internal collapse. To a narcissist, the people they target for relationships, whether romantic, friendly, or even business, are often chosen because of their perceived vulnerabilities. They are drawn to people who are empathetic, accommodating, and eager to please because these traits make it easier to exert control. Once they secure the connection, they begin the process of idealizing, devaluing, and eventually discarding that person. But even in the discard phase, narcissists believe they're in control. If they pull away, it's because they're done using the person. If they come back, it's because they believe they still have power. They rarely consider that the person might be growing stronger, seeing through the facade and preparing to leave them behind on their own terms. Projection in its purest form is a choice. It's someone saying no more. And when that no more comes from a person the narcissist once believed they had complete control over, it destabilizes their self-perception. It's not just hurtful, it's unthinkable. They cannot comprehend how someone they deemed unworthy of power could dare to take power back. This isn't just a loss of control. It's a direct challenge to their belief system. The narcissist views this act as an insult, a betrayal, a violation of their imagined status. The person who was once beneath them suddenly becomes the source of a wound they can't ignore. What makes it even more destructive is the shame that follows. Narcissists don't process shame like emotionally healthy people do. They don't look at their actions and feel guilt or remorse. Instead, they feel exposed, diminished, and threatened. They interpret rejection not as a reflection of their behavior, but as an attack on their identity. If someone they saw as inferior dares to walk away or set a boundary, the narcissist doesn't think, maybe I treated them poorly. Instead, they think, how dare they? That question haunts them. It gnaws at the walls of the false self they built. They wonder how they lost control, why their usual tactics didn't work, and how they failed to predict this outcome. This kind of rejection can become an obsession for the narcissist. They replay conversations, search for cracks in the interaction, and may even stalk or monitor the person to see if they're suffering without them. If the person who rejected them appears happy, successful, or at peace, the narcissist feels another level of pain, envy. They cannot stand to see someone they dismiss not only surviving but thriving without them. That's a narrative they can't accept because in the narcissist's mind they are the prize. They are the one who gives meaning and status to others. So if someone leaves them and seems better off for it, it creates a dissonance too great to bear. In some cases, narcissists attempt to hoover their way back in. They may reappear with apologies, false vulnerability, or a sudden interest in reconciliation. But this isn't about love or accountability. It's about restoring power. They want to flip the story. If they can get the person to come back, they feel like they've erased the rejection. They'll often play the role of the victim, suggesting they were misunderstood or unfairly treated. They might compliment the person or appeal to shared memories, but beneath the surface, they're watching for signs of submission, waiting to see if the person will return to the old dynamic. If the individual holds the boundary, resists contact, or speaks the truth without fear, it reinforces the original injury, and the narcissist retreats into rage, depression, or silent resentment. The rejection from someone they deem inferior also affects how they relate to others afterward. They may become more controlling in future relationships, more paranoid, more emotionally distant, or they may overcompensate by chasing validation from people they believe are worthy of admiration, those with status, beauty, power. But no matter how far they go or how many new people they charm, the sting of being rejected by someone they once devalued lingered. It lives in their memory like a crack they can't repair. It reminds them that no matter how high they place themselves in their own mind, others are still capable of choosing freedom. Narcissists don't expect resistance from the people they belittled or manipulated. They believe their psychological grip is unbreakable. That's why when someone walks away, not in anger, not in desperation, but in peace, it shakes the narcissist's entire sense of superiority. It's one thing to lose someone they admire, but to be discarded by someone they never thought mattered, that undermines the entire illusion. It forces them to realize they misjudged a person and worse that the person saw through them. And nothing breaks a narcissist quite like being seen for what they are and left. Anyway, there is nothing more unsettling to a narcissist than being ignored. To most people, being overlooked can be mildly frustrating or disappointing, but to a narcissist, it is a deep existential blow. Their entire personality is structured around being seen, admired, validated, and most importantly, emotionally relevant. They crave attention the way the body craves oxygen. They don't just enjoy being noticed. They require it to feel like they exist. Every word they say, every calculated gesture, every choice of clothing, every accomplishment they exaggerate is a performance for the audience they expect to applaud. So when that audience goes silent, when people stop reacting, when the spotlight turns elsewhere, a narcissist begins to unravel. Being ignored is not just a lack of attention. It's a refusal to feed their ego. It's someone looking right through them and seeing nothing special. It's someone hearing their words and not rushing to validate them. It's someone knowing their manipulative patterns and choosing not to respond. That kind of indifference hits harder than criticism. Harder than confrontation because criticism at least acknowledges their presence. Silence, on the other hand, strips away their sense of importance. It tells them they are no longer central in someone's world. It says they are not needed, not remembered, not significant. And that message cuts deeper than any insult could. When a narcissist is ignored by someone who used to react to them, someone who once argued, cried, chased, explained, begged, or tried to please them, it's especially painful. It reminds them that their influence is gone. Narcissists don't see relationships in terms of love and trust. They see them in terms of control and supply. If they can get a reaction out of you, positive or negative, they feel powerful. They know they can shape your emotions. But once that emotional bond is severed, once you stop responding to their bait, it's like turning off the oxygen valve to their ego. The silence becomes louder than anything they've ever heard. This is why narcissists often escalate their behavior when they start being ignored. They might reach out with love bombing, sudden apologies or dramatic gestures meant to pull you back into their web. If that fails, they might swing to rage, insults, or threats. Their goal is the same in both cases. Provoke a reaction. They don't care if you're angry, heartbroken, or confused. Those emotions still center them in your world. But true indifference, when you simply stop caring, stops explaining, stop trying to be understood. That's when they panic. That's when the structure of their control begins to collapse. Being made irrelevant is even more devastating because it removes the narcissist's imagined uniqueness. In their mind, they're irreplaceable. They believe that no one else could fill the role they once played in your life. They think their charm, presence, or power was unmatched. But when you move on, when you replace their energy with peace, when you stop referencing them in your story and start building without them, it sends a message they don't know how to digest. It tells them they were not the center. It tells them the world didn't stop when they left. And that kind of revelation wounds them far more than an argument ever could. Narcissists often try to maintain psychic presence in your mind long after they're physically gone. They hope their memory lingers, that you replay their words, that you miss their attention, that you wonder what went wrong. They thrive off the idea that you'll always be thinking of them. But when your silence becomes consistent, when your energy is redirected, when your life improves without their interference, they feel the absence of their reflection in your eye. And because they see themselves through others, that absence becomes an identity crisis. If no one is watching them, praising them, fearing them, or chasing them, they begin to feel like they are nothing at all. Even in public or professional life, being overlooked can destroy a narcissist's self-image. If they speak and no one listens. If they enter a room and aren't greeted with admiration. If others are praised instead of them, it stirs a deep resentment. They feel erased, not just unseen, but invalidated. Their entire sense of self depends on external validation. And without it, they are left with the reality they've been running from. That their worth is not inherent in their persona is not as magnetic as they believe. That realization often leads to bitterness, paranoia, or desperation. They might change tactics, reinvent their image, or try to steal attention through drama or exaggeration. But if those efforts also fail, they fall into a spiral of emptiness they cannot escape from on their own. When narcissists can no longer provoke, inspire, or manipulate emotions, they are forced to confront the hollowness behind the mask. They may lash out at others or turn inward in self-pity. But either way, they feel broken. Ignoring them removes their stage. Making them irrelevant takes away the only thing they truly value, the belief that they matter more than others. And without that belief being mirrored back to them, they are left alone with a version of themselves they don't recognize and can't accept. So, what truly breaks a narcissist is not what most people think. It's not pain. They can dish that out and walk away. It's not anger. They thrive on emotional chaos. What breaks them is the one thing they can't control. Truth. When the truth shows up as public exposure, when rejection comes from someone they thought was beneath them, when they're ignored into silence, when they lose their place in someone's mind, not with noise, but with peace. That's when the mask slips. That's when the empire built on image and ego starts to crack. Because underneath that show of confidence is fear. Beneath that charm is insecurity. Behind the manipulation is a deep desperation to be seen as special, as worthy, as superior. But life has a way of humbling even the loudest egos. And when those four things hit, a mirror with no filters, a stage with no applause, a person walking away without looking back, in a world that keeps turning without them, that's when the narcissist breaks quietly, deep, permanently. You want to break a narcissist, don't fight them, don't feed them. Just see them for who they are and walk away with your peace, your power, and your silence. Because in the end, that's the one thing they never get.